Sometimes when I'm with my students, I'm reminded of the anguish I went through in trying to invent myself. I'm sure you went through exactly the same wrenching process yourself.
For me, it's perhaps, other than the poem, the most compressed medium in art that we have as a culture. And since the short story, like the motion picture, is indigenous to the American culture, it's a form that I've loved reading, and it's a form that I've loved teaching, and it's a form that I love attempting to write myself, and that it's about the most compressed written form that you can share with an audience. And since the American short story didn't have its birth in a paperback, full-blown, it was designed for people in a hurry who were riding the trolley cars, who read them in newspapers and magazines and in serialized fashion.
Right.
It is perhaps the format which should entice people who are part of that fast food culture, the caveat being that it's a fast food form with substance. The American short story is not meant just to be a pulp thriller or a way to fill in a half hour of your life. It can be read several times.
Certainly, then, a short story is more than a chapter in a novel.
I'm suggesting it's more and less, in that it's not leading to the next chapter. It is, of itself, a contained experience. And with that constraint, the fact that when it's over, even though in most cases it doesn't resolve anything the way a full novel does, the chapter of a novel is to lead us to either the next suspenseful event, the growth of the character. The short story, and its very compression, indicates within those few pages that a total experience has occurred for a major character and hopefully for the reader.
I was wondering, you've read many short stories in preparation for this series. Did you find the protagonists in the American short story any different from those that you would find in novels?
I think I would qualify it by merely saying that the novel of the last 10 years in America comes closest to the short story of the last 100 years in terms of its central character. If you think of Saul Bellow or any of Updike's more recent work, or John Cheever, they are characters who are not swashbuckling, gigantic mythological characters. They're people who undergo the same daily pressures, the same indecisiveness that the characters in the short story undergo. But that's a recent phenomenon for the novel, and certainly I'm not sure that people are going to be forever after wanting to read novels about next-door neighbors. What the short story, I think, intentionally sets out to do is to give us a chance to see our neighbors in a more perceptive light. And it may be an act of artful audacity, of boldness, to say, we're asking you to look at people who are not living lives that are so terribly romantic and adventuresome.
Bob, are you saying then that Andy in I'm a Fool, Bernice in Bernice Bobs Her Hair, and David in the Richard Wright story are all very much like us? They're just regular people struggling.
I think the denouement, the way the stories end, and we don't want to tip that off now, may be more dramatic than life is itself. But the conflicts that the characters undergo, Andy in I'm a Fool is caught in something that we all do every day of our lives in terms of inadvertently or not stretching a truth in order to win favor.
How do you do? Walter L. Mathers, Jr. of Marietta, Ohio. My family has this place down on the Ohio River, a big old house, kind of stuffy for some taste maybe, but we have the most beautiful stables you've ever seen. And Henry, would you like a cigar?
Bernice, even though supposedly the role of the woman has changed dramatically in the last 50 years since the 19th Amendment, is caught up in having to assimilate the social mores, the dating patterns in order to win favor.
But now you have to perfect a pathetic look, too.
Why?
Well, it comes in handy in certain situations.
With men?
Well, of course, with men. When you go east to school, you're going to run into Babs Finley.
The one who got fired from Miss Walker's?
Oh, well, she's been fired from 3 schools that I know of. Maybe more. Anyway, she has probably got the greatest pathetic look of any girl in our generation.
How do you do it?
Open your eyes wide. Now you droop your bottom lip. And you look straight into the man's eyes and say, I hardly have any beaux at all.
I hardly have any beaux at all.
Not bad.
And certainly David in Richard Wright's story, a young black yoked to a plow, dependent upon his family, really having no place to go except out of that environment, is not a dated character.
Come on, Jenny. This here's the last row today. Tell you something, I'll be glad it is. Yes, you too, the way you dragging. This ground's so hard. I hate it when it gets this way.
The 3 of them are young adults,
Yeah.
and yet they appear to me, and I hope they will be for our audiences, to be young adults with whom we can identify for all time.
I know you've been very concerned with fidelity between short story and the film that you make. I was really surprised when I read Soldier's Home to find that a character named Kenner was not in the story.
The Soldier's Home is about a young man who needs time, and he needs to process things internally. The way we try to find at least visual analogs, visual equivalents for Krebs's agony, his angst, is to not invent characters who don't appear within his own interior experience. He talks about meeting other soldiers.
Christ, what do you want to do? Just mope around forever? Can't figure you. Whenever I want to forget about things, I just drink. Drink and find a woman. I want to remember the good things. Like being over there, scared to death, watching guys screaming and bleeding to death. I wasn't scared, not like you tell it. Damn. Everybody was. You ever wake up in the sweats and shivers? I used to stuff my blanket in my mouth so I wouldn't. I was scared. Everybody was. That's a lie. Everybody was. Only one thing worth remembering over there. Damn women. No names. No faces. Just those white bodies smelling like sweet apricots in those warm hotel rooms. That isn't worth remembering. So what is worth remembering? Being a good soldier. Doing what you had to do. Being a good soldier? You're crazy, Krebs. You really are. And you lie, Kenner, about everything. Don't call me a liar. It's not worth it. Shut up!
Hey, you all right?
I don't need a friend like you.
Now, wait.
Go on.
Go on, Kenner!
What I did as adapter, with the very careful advice of two Hemingway scholars, is try to find a visual, dimensional equivalent of what was going on in Harold Krebs's mind. And I hope we've been as faithful to Hemingway as we have been to the other writers in the series.
When I read Sherwood Anderson's paragraph about young Andy putting on a derby hat and walking about town, into the bar, acting tough, more experienced than, of course, he was, I was struck that when you filmed that, it was far more vivid than that Anderson paragraph.
I think if we succeed with the Anderson story and with hopefully all of the stories in the series, it's because of the ability to do what film should do successfully. If it's going to attempt to translate great literature, it should work well within its own medium. And the medium of film done well is physical gesture. It's the ability to portray action in one movement, which is done well, but done in a much different format than obviously the printed page.
I love that moment when you had Bert straighten Andy's tie. And I also noticed you changed the bumping in the story to the young man offering or asking to have a cigarette lit.
Yes.
Why did you do that?
Sometimes those things are not merely accidents. They're parts of collaboration as you move into the filming. I'm not sure whether Bert very gently straightening Andy's tie, which is about as paternalistic and gentle a thing as a father can do for a son. I'm not sure whose suggestion it was, but certainly it was our attempt to make vivid something that's more than hinted at in Sherwood Anderson's story.
Hey, you going someplace special?
Bert? You think you could tend things without me today? I want to walk around and see this place. Might even buy myself a grandstand ticket and sit with all the dudes.
Look for some women, that it?
Do I look all right?
Nope. Come here. You know what you need to look like a real swell? A derby.
I take it then that various kinds of visual clues, or what actors call stage business, is very important and to making points about character, Bob?
It's the excitement and the mystery of filmmaking if it's done well. And I think it's one of the most important justifications for translating fiction and not letting it sit on dusty shelves, which is what has happened to too many short stories in the last 20 years. I think is reflected in films like Bernice Bobs Her Hair. If you remember the scene right after the dance when her cousin is talking to her mother behind a closed door, and we hear what Bernice hears, that she's an absolute drag. And the way she kind of slumps and walks into her room, and we move to her on her bed with the hint, but not a total giveaway, of her braiding her hair and just the sound of what sounds like a broken heart.
Yeah.
Done probably within 15 seconds. That's the magic of filmmaking. The magic of what happens in Ernest Hemingway's Soldier's Home, when Harold Krebs comes home the first night, and just the way he undoes his button.
Bob, are you saying that this is one of the advantages in switching from the print mode to the film mode? Being able to deal with physical action in such an incredibly concrete way that...
I think I'd respond to the question by saying it's not an advantage, and I don't mean to be defensive about it. I think the short story is a very private human experience, as is any reading experience. And to say that reading Richard Wright in the quiet comfort of our study or in our bedroom or wherever we find our reading most relaxed and privileged, that experience in no way is improved for a human being by seeing it on film. I'm being very honest about this. I think what the advantage of translating to film through physical image is that it does make it something that's accessible to lots of people at one time. And I really don't want to be in the position of either defending the story, which will survive if people continue to read it. And that's been one of our concerns, that the short story is not being read. There is no outlet for it. And perhaps film will not legitimatize it, but it will reintroduce people who have loved good short stories, and certainly for new young audiences, part of our fast food, on-the-move culture, who may never have heard of Richard Wright, quite literally, or Ambrose Bierce, or John Updike, that it will make palatable, not as a sugar-coated introduction to literature, introduce them to characters who become important because they've seen them, and then go back to the private experience of being able to read that chapter. I don't think anything is lost.
I don't see how younger audiences can resist the plight of Andy, Bernice, and David.
We would hope so. What we hoped is that the stories would appeal to younger readers, certainly, but the appeal would be based on the things that maybe they're afraid to express to their own friends or their own teachers or their own parents. And through the vehicle of the story and the film, we'll recognize that writers of centuries gone by, or at least 50 years ago, were experiencing the same growing pains, the same sense of isolation, of being an outsider.
The rite of passage is not just limited to adolescence.
Partly.
I noticed, for example, in John Updike's The Music School and the James story, Jolly Corner, that both of those characters seem, they're going through some incredibly deep self-assessment.
Quite accurate. And I think if one were to find a thread, and not invent one, that the choices of Spencer Bryden and Jolly Corner and Alfred Schweigen, who are obviously not kids, they're not adolescents, they are human beings in the middle point of their lives, a theme that's quite common to us who sit here now. And what Alfred Schweigen in Music School and Spencer Bryden and Jolly Corner are really all about is trying to make the same sense of discovery that Bernice and Andy and David are trying to make in their lives.
What is your hope for this film series in that light?
The answer to that, Frank, is twofold. And the first answer is interrelated, in that our goal had been to get new readers, those who are new to our writers like Hemingway, Updike, and Fitzgerald, and also older readers who've neglected some of the masters of American fiction, to rediscover what our literary heritage has been. And along with that, to make viewers of this series much more articulate about how film can work, what its responsibilities are, not only in translating literature to film, but how film can work, hopefully, with a degree of integrity. And the second answer, which I think is more personally important to me, is that having been lucky enough to have, through the selection process, found 9 stories that are ambiguous. They end with no pat formula, as does a good deal of contemporary television. They end with questions not answered, which is pretty much what makes a short story so special. And they do something else. And they do it perhaps vicariously at first. They say to an audience, here's Andy, having his growing pains, having told a lie, or Bernice, or Alfred Schweigen, trying to survive some very stormy days, undergoing experiences that are very, very painful. And what it says to an audience, legitimatizing for them, is feel. Don't be embarrassed, because we are a culture, and I think it's unique to this culture, which is split in that we treasure our privacy. It's been part of that frontier spirit. And at the same time, we almost hunger for a chance of communal coming together, usually during times of great loss or grief or jubilation. And what the American Short Story series is attempting to do is to enable our readers and our viewers to begin to feel again, and to feel without embarrassment, with impunity, and to begin to share those feelings with those who read and view the series with them.